I think it's actually, starting out in your career is know the business you're in. So if you're an FM, for example, and you've got 20 tenants, know who those 20 tenants are, know who they are, get to know them, get to understand them, and also understand the business that you work for. And if you're in the corporate real estate space, like where I am, what I've done, the first thing I did was get to know steel, get to understand what it is, what am I doing, what are they selling and how can I help them. So I think understanding the business that you work in means that understanding their ROI, their risks, what's important to them. If you understand that, you become really valuable to a company, and I think your voice will be heard and it becomes so much easier to get to that next step. And when you're interested, there might be an opportunity for progression. You're going to be the first person they think of.
Well, welcome to the podcast, Leah Ong.
Thank you.
Head of Property at InfraBuild.
Yes, that's correct.
Tell us a little bit about that role. It sounds huge from what I've heard.
It is. It's a wonderful job. I absolutely love where I work, and got a great group of people that I work with as well. So we have about 160 leased properties, about 28 owned, and about 5.5 million square metres of space that we look after. So it's a pretty hefty portfolio, the biggest that I've ever looked after, but it's a really unique portfolio as well. So InfraBuild's Australia's largest integrated steel company. So we have distribution sites, we've got steel mills, we've got recycling facilities, all sorts of different facilities, as well as office, where we house all of our support staff as well. So really interesting and large portfolio. Yeah,
and you've had a really cool career in the facilities property space.
Yes.
Just hearing a little bit about it before, you were at GYG before that. Tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are today.
It's been a long journey. I've been in property for over 23 years now. I think probably something that's most interesting, which I always like to tell people, is I didn't study property. I did international business at university, and I fell into property completely by accident.
Do you know that's what every person we interview says pretty much? I go into facilities by accident.
Exactly. And I think that's a good thing. I started in residential. Actually, it was for a construction company who were building investment properties for people, and they realised they were just handing these properties to real estate agents, and I was just doing some admin and various other work straight out of university, and they said, do you want to head up our portfolio? And they said, well, go along, get your real estate licence and you can start doing it for us. I went, fantastic. So that was my first sort of step into property, and we went from zero to about 85 properties before I left. So, building that from scratch with a lovely gentleman who was my first mentor. He was in his 70s at this time. His name was Noel, and he taught me everything there was to know about.
Noel sounds like a 70-year-old.
Yeah, he was just a sweetheart. He really was. And it was so fun. I really enjoyed it. And then, but I guess the difference between resi and commercial industrial is residential is very personal. It's about where you live, and that can be quite stressful as a property manager. I think property managers are the most underrated, resi property managers are the most underrated people. They deal with so much, they get very little thanks, and it's such a hard job, but a great place to start in property. And then I went, this is probably not for me. I think commercial is where I want to head out, and that's when I started moving into agency, landlord side as well, so working directly in buildings. And one of my biggest goals while I was in property management was to manage an A-grade building, which I ended up managing the Riverside Centre in Brisbane.
Oh wow!
I was so excited because there were very few women at the time who were general managers. There are a few of us actually. We used to call ourselves, in Brisbane it's called the Golden Triangle, where all the premium buildings are. So we used to call ourselves the Golden Triangle Girls. And really it was just an excuse to get together and have wine.
Yes. Love that.
But it was really nice to have. There was sort of so few of us, and now all of a sudden, almost, a lot of buildings, there's more than 50% that are general managers are women. So that was fantastic for me. And then I decided to get into advisory with Cushman & Wakefield, which was, I guess, my first step into corporate real estate. And for those who don't know, and I didn't know what corporate real estate really meant, was essentially just working for companies where property is not the core business. Mm-hmm. So essentially we manage portfolios for businesses that align with their business needs, but actually managing those properties for them. So I thought, this is fantastic. I love this, and I really want to be on that side.
Yeah.
So that's when I got my first taste of it, a little bit at GYG on the quick service retail side, which was super fun. But then into Volvo Group Australia, which was amazing, learning. For those who don't know as well, any Volvo truck or Mack truck you see on the road in Australia is made in our Wacol facility.
Oh, wow.
So it's fantastic and such a
Yep.
great tour.
Yeah.
Yeah, so every truck that you see it's proudly made in Australia or put
Did you
together.
say you can do a tour?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh.
Yes.
I'm going to go.
Don't tell them I told you.
It's going out into the public. Too late.
Tell Martin Leah sent you. Yes, you'll love that. No, but it's fantastic. It's such a great place to see how they're pulled together. I mean, it's quite amazing. And then over to luxury vehicles, which was fantastic.
Did you get to drive one?
I did not. I got to see lots of them. They were fantastic. But I think Ferrari was one of those really interesting ones for me, and it was really about that high-end branding. And actually, for me, was the first time of really understanding customer experience in relation to property. So what we create, the vibe that you come into, and say for example Rolls-Royce or BMW is different to what it is at Volvo, for example. So seeing that really different customer experience was so interesting, and to get to see all these beautiful, Ferrari, we got to, amazing features, beautiful chairs, leather furniture, everything came from Italy, was imported in, it was just beautiful. So that was really fun. And then now into steel. So, and I think that's the interesting thing about corporate real estate is that as a property person, you get to learn other businesses. It's not just about property, but you get to learn about other businesses as well.
I've never heard of it put the way you put it just before. You said it's about managing properties for businesses where that's not their
core business.
Yeah. So it gives you that exposure to all these different things because you're doing the same thing at all these places.
Exactly.
And you're the expert of that. But you get to be exposed to some really cool, differing business types.
And I think that also helps understanding different property strategies as well. Some businesses might be on a huge acquisition scale up, and there might be some that, for example, at the moment we're doing a lot of right sizing. What do we need, what don't we need, and really having a think about what we do. And I like to look at it as that we allow businesses to do what they do best. Give us your property work, we'll manage that for you. We make sure it's all done properly, and we let them do what they do best.
That's like what we often talk about in our business. We say, on a much smaller scale, we say, let us look after the floors and you do what you do best. You manage the facility and not worry about it. We'll just look after the floors for you.
Exactly, and it's so important.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, wow. And so now being at InfraBuild has a very big sustainability focus, obviously, in what they're achieving as their core business.
Yeah.
Has that amped up the sustainability aspect of your role as a head of property and managing the facilities teams and everything, the deliverables and sustainability goals? Are they more so at a company like this than other companies you've worked at?
Look, I think so. I think there's sustainability, which I think is great, and ESG in general is not going anywhere. I mean, it's so important that we start to think about that. And one thing I love about what I do is we're allowing what we do to make the world a better place in some ways. The work that we do actually genuinely affects the business. So I think, things like the solar panels and, water catchment, those very simple things can be done quite easily, things that we're looking at doing as well, rolling out that through our own portfolio. But I think from the lease portfolio, it can be a little bit difficult because you're often, I think institutional landlords really get it. They understand and they've got their own drives, so they want us to work with them and really provide, start working on adding those things to our buildings. But if you've got a mum and dad investor, sustainability is not so important. It's about bringing in the rent, paying the bills, and that's okay too. And you know what I like to say to people as well as, you know, and anyone who's in this role and FM, whatever you do, sustainability doesn't have to be these massive, big initiatives. You know, they can be really small, and you know, things that I look at, for example, monitoring might be water, might be energy, might be life cycle, whatever it is. If you monitor it, you can improve on it.
Yes.
So I think that's really important, and if that's the first start that you make in an organisation, if you're not too far advanced into your sustainability, you know, cycle through your business, start there, start monitoring, and that's something that can be really easily done.
Yeah, wow.
One of the little things we've started doing as being a service provider, we do a low moisture cleaning of carpets and hard floors for commercial tenancies or commercial facilities. And we started doing reports on, by switching to our version of cleaning, this is how much water, energy you're saving compared to the traditional methods, which facility managers are loving. Because it's a little thing, but it shows a huge win for them on the sustainability.
And it's tangible, right?
Yeah.
It's something they can take to their business and say, hey, I might have saved money, or even if you've spent money, but if you've been able to really cut down on water and waste and all of those things, I mean, that's fantastic. And even the little things, you know, we look at as well. I've just done doing some commercial work in our building here in Sydney, and you know, looking at ways where we can utilise furniture in other locations. Okay, we don't need this anymore. Where else can we put it? It doesn't need to go to landfill. You know, I think there's some great companies out there like Relove, for example. So if people are, you know, knocking down their you know, their commercial workspaces, they can donate that furniture into people that need it. And I think that's fantastic if we can keep everything out of landfill.
The circular economy stuff is so it's not going anywhere either. It's so important.
Yeah, and I think people are starting to monitor that as well, and you can start to really look at what you've got in your space and what you can do with it once its life cycle's finished.
Yeah, that's great.
I love it. Tell me a little bit about, you mentioned before that the golden triangle and being a woman in this space. Now there's a lot more than there was.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that journey and where you see that diversity piece. Is there more of a focus on it in the facility space at the moment?
Look, I think so. It was really tough. You know, I think was like in my career was sort of early 2000s, and it was hard. And I think there were no D&I targets really. You know, wasn't really spoken about. It was really difficult. But I think, you know, for me, and I probably did the wrong thing at one point, thinking that I had to fit in, that I had to change who I was in order to get somewhere. And I probably focused on that too much, but actually it wasn't until I own the space that I'm in, that I'm comfortable in the space that I'm in. And actually being feminine is okay too. You know, in this industry, dealing with people, you bring a different perspective, and I think that's really great. I think if people own who you are and your differences, I think that creates something that's really exciting. But for me, I think it's not only gender diversity in FM as well, but cultural diversity, you know, bringing people from all different backgrounds. I think that's what creates great perspective in what we do. And I think we can really learn from other people's perspective. And I'm a big believer as well, you know, when you employ someone, don't employ someone who looks or sounds like you. You know, find someone who challenges you or is a little bit different to you, has different, you know, ideas and perspectives. I think that makes you a better person and a better leader as well. Yeah. But it's tough, and I think you know, probably for me, if you're, you know, say a person, a marginalised person, or you know, might be a woman in the industry, you know, find yourself a mentor as well. I think for me that's key. I think finding someone that can really stand up for you, you know, say great things about you when you're not in the room, and be someone that's there for you. I think if you can find that, that's really helpful, in particular as a young woman coming into this industry and industries like FM, which are predominantly male-dominated.
Yeah.
How would you go about finding a mentor? So you mentioned Noel earlier. I don't know if that just organically came about or if you went and asked him.
He was my first mentor, and then I had nobody because I didn't really know it was a thing. And so funny story, I actually found one of my mentors on what was Twitter at the time. Someone had said, "Oh, have you seen this lady? You know, Dr. Kirsten?" And I went, "Oh, no, I've never heard of her." And I jumped on. I thought, "Oh God, she's fabulous." So I just sent her a note and said, "Hi, I'm Leah. It's really nice to meet you. Someone recommended." And she wrote straight back and said, "Hey, nice to hear from you. Next time I'm in town, we'll catch up for a coffee." And so it was very, very relaxed and very organic, and it wasn't a formal process, but I got the opportunity to have a coffee with her and have a chat, and it was amazing. And I ended up she wrote a book later on and started getting a bunch of women to write, things that were going on in their lives. I ended up being a part of that book, and it was just this amazing sort of story of meeting someone on Twitter out of all places. And I think, other ways, for me, I think it's just ask the question. The worst someone can say is, "Look, sorry, I'm really busy." And that's okay too. You ask the question. That's the worst that someone can tell you, then that's okay. But I will say, if you have been mentored, then you do need to pay it forward. Always. I think that's something that's really important. If you've had the benefit and the advantage of having someone give their time to you, make sure that you pay it forward.
Yeah. And I imagine now in the role you're in with 5.5 million square metres, you aren't able to do that all on your own. So you probably have a significant team compared to some of the other roles you've been in where it probably was just you.
Yes.
So you are getting to outwork that being a mentor in that space. What do you look for whenever you're hiring someone? What are you looking for in a FM or a team member?
That's a great question. I'm actually hiring at the moment. Looking for a property manager. But I think what's really interesting with what we do is finding someone, in particular in the FM space. I love to hire people who they treat the buildings as if it was their own. They've got a real love and care for the building, and the way they talk about the building and those exciting things, I think, is great. A lot of FMs come from trade backgrounds and other things, which is fantastic as well, but sometimes that isn't always necessary. I think it's really nice to, if you've come in from a different background, bring that different perspective. I think that's great too. And I think FM's a really interesting one where I think you've got to manage up and down. So you might at one moment be dealing with a contractor and talking about aircon, and the next minute you might have to present at a board meeting for a CapEx request for a business case, for example. So I think finding people, or if people are thinking about upskilling, working on ways that they can, really cross over those different spaces, because that's really important, I think.
Someone who can they can't be rigid, can they? Facility manager, you've really got to be able to go with the flow, I think.
Yes, absolutely, and just being quite calm. I think, and I see it as, for me, I've always thought that, when I think about a building, or say it's from FM, you've got the GM, I actually see it the other way around. The FM's the most important person. I actually think they are key, because they're the eyes and ears of the building. They're the heartbeat of the building. They're the ones that the tenants will go to when, something's wrong, or if, and often they'll know more about your tenant base than anybody does. They'll be the ones telling you, "Hey, such and such lease is coming up. I've just heard they're looking at space elsewhere." They're the guys and girls that will hear about that before you do. So I think it's such a key role, and an important role that we have. And I've worked with amazing FMs over the years, and I think that's, for me, working out ways of dealing with people of all different places and beings. I think that's key.
I like to tell my employees that they're my boss.
Yes,
like you are the most important. So
you don't always love it though when we say that.
When they tell me I'm your boss.
Not the same.
So you said before that you like to hire from all different cultures and people who are different.
Yes.
Because they offer a different perspective. I think that's a profound thought, because you think about facility managers, they are often the first face people see, or if people have questions about something not working, they've got to go to the facility manager. And oftentimes our facilities are so broad in the types of cultures, backgrounds, sexualities, genders, everything. It's so nice to hear that there's people out there who are hiring with that in mind. you're representing more than just one type of person.
That's
So we're
right.
going to hire for all types of people here.
Yeah, and people who understand that, I think, is really key too. You know, that you're going to be dealing, you know, in particular with your tenants, you're going to be dealing with people from, you know, say for example, you know, I'm a tenant in my own building, and I deal with the facilities manager and the property manager, asset manager, etc. So you're dealing with people from all different walks of life. So I think that's really important to, you know, when you're thinking about that as an FM, and you know, being a little bit more open to that as well.
Yeah. We work with some sort of facility management firms, I guess, and for a while there, every facility we'd go into, it was a lot of older facility managers, and then we got sent into a software as a service company, so a SaaS company, which is our background. We're both from the SaaS space, and we walked in and they'd put this FM in there that just looked like he was from the SaaS world, right? Like he was just young and hip, and he's like, "Hey, how you going?" When we walked in,
different.
and we were like, "Oh, this is different. This is a different FM than what we're used to." But he was right for that client. Like he was right for that space.
Yes.
That's so true, actually, because at the end of the day, if you're in that FM space and you're hiring out people for your buildings, that's right, making sure that that person fits with that company, you know, I think that's so important. That's great, I love that.
It was I remember walking in, we were both just like, "Oh,
Yeah, it was great.
he's the right guy."
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very different. In terms of the trends, like you've been around the property space for a while. Trends come and go.
Yep.
Are there trends that you're seeing at the moment that are maybe here to stay? We talked about sustainability already.
Yeah, and look, ESG in general, I think that is here to stay, and I think it's only going to get bigger and better. I think that's wonderful. I think the more that we really delve into that space, and in particular around, you know, we do a lot around the E, a lot around the environmental, but the social and the governance side, I think that's going to be really important in how we move forward, in how we manage buildings, how landlords manage buildings. And I think with that as well is about flexible space. I think that's something that is here to stay. And I think that happened post-COVID, or COVID and post-COVID. Companies are, you know, we go up, we go down. It might depend on the industry. And so I think landlords have predominantly been it's quite rigid in that, you know, you've got to have a 10-year lease in order for this to stack up and make sense. And look, that comes down to the banks as well, the valuations, what the WALE is of the building. So look, that hasn't changed, which may have to change as well, which I think it does.
Yeah.
So that it allows for businesses and for buildings to have that more flexible space for people. And I think that will become more important in industrial as well. Industrial spaces, we often have really large areas, and then all of a sudden we don't need that anymore, and we're trying to sublease part of a building out, which is almost impossible. So I think allowing some flexibility in that space will be here, and absolutely AI and automation.
Yeah,
that's
not going anywhere.
That's not going anywhere, and it's exciting, and I think from an FM perspective, it is so exciting because it's not going to replace people. You know, I think property, it's human. It's human nature. That nothing's going to take away from that. But I think what AI and automation will do is make it better. And having people that you're not relying on this sort of day-to-day, you know, drag work that you're doing. You can actually concentrate on some really great strategy. It might be sustainability or things that you want to work on and improve. You're not having to do that sort of basic things that can be done by AI automation as well.
Yeah, and it just makes an FM's life, I think, easier because they're juggling so many balls. So if they can automate some of that, it just removes some of that headache, right? Yeah,
like I look at it even from us, from a lease perspective. You know, we're looking at opportunities at the moment for AI to start doing lease extracts for us. So things where, you know, you plug it into the system, it comes out, and you've got these great lease extracts because, you know, we have 160 of them. You know, that's hard work, and especially when it comes time 5 years later, you're doing a lease renewal, and then it comes again, and then you've got these new documents. So being able to, you know, because somebody has to do it, right, and then update it in the system and make sure that everything's, you know, working well. But to be able to automate that would be fantastic. You know, so we're looking at those types of opportunities at the moment as well.
If you were giving advice to an FM that had never used AI before and didn't know where to get started or how to get familiar with it, what would you say?
Just get ChatGPT app or one of them and just start playing around, and you'll see it changes your life. I think just the simple things, you know, for me, I'm the sort of person, I know what I want to say, but it's quite difficult to, I think, here's all the things that I need to get out. And sometimes I'll just plug that in and it'll give me some structure to what I actually want to present. I think, that's a great thing to start working on from a simple perspective. And there's so many I've seen some automation and AI in the FM space that's going to be really exciting in monitoring, environmental monitoring and things like that. The digital buildings, all sorts of things that are happening in that space. So I think, don't be scared of it, don't be frightened. Actually just jump in and give it a go, start trying some things and research as well, because there's some really interesting and cool things out there.
Yeah. You mentioned before that we're all sort of doing our part in the environmental space when it comes to ESG, but we've got a bit to go with the social and governance. Without bending and warping things, how does an FM incorporate the S and the G into their practices? That's
a great question. It can be really difficult because you might not necessarily have that say in, on the table, right? But I think what an FM can do is provide the data, right? So they're speaking to the tenants. The tenant might say, hey, we've been using a lot of water, or we're doing, from an environmental perspective, that type of thing. But for an FM, they're starting to get to know the people, they understand what's going on, they understand their building, and it's actually their voice that can be heard, through to, when it comes to asset managers, listen to your FMs. I think, that's key for them to really understand that. But it can be really tricky when you're in that space, but you don't necessarily have that voice to be able to bring it forward. But I'm a big believer, put together a business case. If you see something you think you could provide some value, put it together, present it. People will love the initiative. I think that's, that's a great thing I'd love that. If someone came to me and said, hey, I've got some ideas, what do you think? Brilliant. I love that.
Yeah. What would you say is the key difference? So there's facility managers, there's property managers, there's asset managers. In some smaller spaces, the FM or the PM or the AM is all three.
All three, yes, I've been that.
Yes. And then we get to some larger organisations where they have them all unique. What would you say separates the three? How would you put them into their buckets? And do they overlap? Do they inform each other around decisions?
I think probably sometimes they've been put into their buckets, which isn't necessarily a great thing. Okay. I actually think FMs should understand what the life is like of a property manager and the property manager of an FM, because sometimes they don't overlap and they go, this is my thing, this is what I do, I'm working on budgets, I'm doing this, you're doing that, and they don't actually speak to each other. And then you've got the asset manager sort of trying to pull everything together, not knowing what's going on. Yeah. But actually, I think sometimes being able to step into those shoes, and I'm a big believer in, certainly when I've hired people, I actually bring FMs and they do a little bit of work in the property management space. If someone goes on leave, they actually take over some of that role. So I think, to get an idea, and then they go, oh God, this is why every time this person complains about something, now I know why they're on me to get this thing done all the time. So I think you really understand that perspective, and because sometimes I think they can be separated and they probably shouldn't be. I think really understanding how each of them works is a good thing.
Yeah. And like the asset management is looking more at the longer term, I think, and the value of all the assets, whereas the facility manager is looking at the people side.
It's the day-to-day.
And the property manager is looking at budgets and...
so it can be difficult, but I think altogether, and that's why I think in those positions too, those weekly meetings are so important, where they're all together, talk about what's going on. And the week of, I've got this happening, everybody then knows what's going on in each other's lives, and I think that is so important, because I think you can lose perspective, in particular when you move into asset management and you sort of move into more those strategic roles. You tend to forget about what it was like, going to fix a, leaking tap, or something's going on, or I've got a tenant complaining about this. You can forget about that. So I think it's really important to keep that.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you manage 160, 170 odd properties, how do you ensure that your team does have that connection? So beyond the weekly meetings and those sorts of things, how do you make sure everyone's on the same page?
I think it's about getting to know each other as well. And I think, personally, I think, we come to work and we spend so much time here. You want to know the people that you work with, what's important to them, what are they going home to? Is there something going on in their lives? I think that's really important. I think that can also help, when it comes to, people maybe having some issues, or they might be a little bit not themselves and they might be having some concerns. I think that's when you can pick up on those things when you've got to know somebody. And I think sometimes when you manage large portfolios, you can forget about the people. You're just getting in, getting your job done, you're focusing on doing what you need to do. But I think that part of it's really important, getting to know your staff, doing things together, team building, whatever it might be, in really understanding how each other works.
Yeah.
In wrapping up, what would you say is if you could give one piece of advice to an FM or PM out there starting out in their career, what would it be?
I was thinking about this, and I think it's actually, starting out in your career is know the business you're in. So if you're an FM, for example, and you've got 20 tenants, know who those 20 tenants are, know who they are, get to know them, get to understand them, and also understand the business that you work for. And if you're in the corporate real estate space, like where I am, what I've done, the first thing I did was get to know steel, get to understand what it is, what am I doing, what are they selling, and how can I help them. So I think understanding the business that you work in means that understanding their ROI, their risks, what's important to them. If you understand that, you become really valuable to a company, and I think your voice will be heard, and it becomes so much easier to get to that next step. And when you're interested, there might be an opportunity for progression. You're going to be the first person they think of.
Well, you've obviously done that really well in your career because you've worked in such different niches, but able to build a significant career. What are the questions you asked? How have you found out what you needed to know about steel and infra build and all the nuances to their business to be able to deliver the property aspect of their business?
That is a great question, and the first thing I did was get my boots and my hat and my vest and I'm on site, and that was it. And tour of every type of facility that we do, and ask sometimes they're stupid questions. Why do you do this, and what's happening here? And what I think people don't realise, people love to talk about what they do. They really do. And so someone who's super passionate about what they do, they'll happily talk to you all day about what it is that they're working on, why it's important to them. In particularly our recycling business, those guys are super passionate. It's a funny, quirky type industry as well. But last time I went to site, there's a guy with this giant claw machine picking up cars and throwing. It was so cool. And I said, can I walk through there? And they were like, yeah, we've got to turn everything off, but you can go for a walk through. And I would have
asked for a turn on the floor.
I know. I was very tempted, but I don't think I was capable of doing that. But I had a chat to the guy, and he's just like, I love what I do. And I was like, really? He said, yep, I love it. He said, I just get to move stuff around. This is so cool. I get these cool equipment. And
I mean, that's the job that every 3 or 4 year old wants. If you ask them what I want to be, I want to move cars.
The giant claw machine. It's very cool. But that I got to understand, about the business, what they do and why it's important, and then understanding, that's why there's a truck that goes around that with water that, keeps the dust at bay, things like that. And then I realised, so that's why I've got all this trouble with dust and my neighbours, because they're always complaining about the dust. That's why we do what we do. So I think just and look, it has to be a genuine interest. You really want to get to know your business, and you have to really want to do that. But I think if you do that, you become really valuable to the organisation, because you can help in other areas, and you come in with a different perspective. Being in property, you might come in with a different perspective once you've seen something. So that's what I recommend. Just get out there and have a look.
I think that's so interesting. Like when I first started at Premrest dealing with floors, I'm like, how can anyone be excited about floors, right? Like I was like, I'll try and start a sales team for you. We'll see what we can do here. But the more I got to know the people in our business, who were so passionate about it, I'm like, maybe there is something to it. And then the more I'd go out on site and see how filthy some people's carpets were, and how much they were struggling with certain service providers and whatever, you go, I can help here. And now, a few years in, I'm like, I walk into every facility I walk into, I look at the floors first, and now I'm just like,
Yes, you can't help
I
it.
live and breathe it. But
Yeah.
it all started with the people,
Yes.
and their passion for it or their problems with it, and then it just flowed on from there. So
Yeah, finding that passion, and finding, and look, not every part of your day is going to be fantastic. There's always difficult things, but I think it does. It comes down to people. It's human, right? I think it comes down to that. I think enjoying what you do and actually having a genuine interest, but I think that passion can come too. Like you say, it's not necessarily you wake up and say, I'm going to get into floors, but when you do, you go, this is amazing. I love this. Now I get to provide a service to people. They love what I do. They come back to us. They refer us to other people. There's nothing better than that when you get a referral from someone who they go, oh, they did a fantastic job and we want you to do this now. And you go, yes, that's great. Yeah,
I mean, it would have been different if I was doing Mexican food. I could be passionate about GYG.
Absolutely. It's a tough gig.
I can't imagine it being a tough gig. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You've built such a great career, and I think it's going to be so inspirational for FMs and PMs out there who are listening to see not only someone just smashing their career, but a woman who's built a career like this can be inspiring for a lot of women out there to see themselves out there.
Yeah, thank you so much. And for anyone, please feel free to connect. I think it's really important that we all connect and stay. Property in general, doesn't matter if it's FM, corporate, whatever it is. It's such a small industry, even nationally, for us. So reach out. I'd love to hear from you. And thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful.
They can connect with you on LinkedIn, I'm assuming?
Absolutely.
Yep, yes. Leah Ong on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Perfect.
Wonderful.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.